Hey everyone! Today I'm going to be rambling with delusions of grandeur, talking about various interesting conditions of our brain and everything related to it. And since there are quite a few videos like this out there, I will only briefly mention the following illnesses, because everyone has already talked about them. Let's run through them real quick. Capgras delusion or Capgras syndrome. Due to a severe connection between the amygdala and the brain area that recognizes faces, a person cannot associate the faces of familiar people with their identities, which makes them think they are imposters. Frigoli syndrome, the exact opposite of Capgras. A person believes that everything around them is just one single person who is in disguise or pretending to be others. Cotard syndrome. A person believes that they are dead, rotting, that they have no organs, and so on. Patients might stop eating and drinking, because, obviously, dead people don't need to do that. Prosopagnosia. A person cannot recognize faces. They might recognize individual facial features, but cannot put them together in the whole picture. Alien hand syndrome. A part of a person's body acts independently from the patient. It often occurs due to damage or surgeries on the corpus callosum, which connects the hemispheres. Apotemnophilia. A person wants to amputate their own limb or become disabled. Interestingly, brain scans show that this specific body part is missing from the body map in the parietal lobe of the cortex. Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Spatial perception is distorted. Objects and body parts can appear either huge or tiny. Aphantasia. A person lacks, ability to fantasize. There is no ability to visualize anything in their head. Synesthesia. Information from the one sensory organ crosses over with another, which makes a person able to hear smells or see sounds. Stendhal syndrome. Rapid heartbeat, dizziness, and intense excitement when a person sees a work of art. Egg bomb syndrome. A person is convinced that there are parasites, worms, and other insects in their skin. Patients physically feel them and even bring evidence of their eggs, which are actually just pieces of dust or skin. The Truman Show delusion. A person thinks that everyone around them is an actor and that they are trapped in a reality show. Alright, now that we are done with that, let's move on to the main part. Here I have gathered conditions that were interesting to me and that I have either never seen or seen too rarely mentioned by other creators. Here's the list for you. The timestamps are laid out as always. Linguistic phenomena. Schizophagia. Schizophagia is a symptom of a mental disorder, most commonly associated with a schizophrenia, that manifests as grammatically correct phrases that make no sense in relation to one another within a sentence. Words might be connected within a tiny segment, but the overall text makes zero sense and is completely incoherent. Patients speak volubly. The topic jumps from one to another, and the patient doesn't care about the listener's reaction, or whether there is a listener present at all. A perfect example is the old audio recording from 1962 of a schizophrenic patient.
Родился на улице Герцена, в гастрономе номер 22, известный экономист, по призванию своему библиотекарь, в народе колхозник, в магазине продавец, в экономике, так сказать, необходим. Это, так сказать, система в составе 120 единиц. Фотографируйте Мурманский полуостров и получаете телефон Кена. И бухгалтер работает по другой линии, по линии библиотека. Потому что не воздух будет, а академик будет. Ну вот можно сфотографировать Мурманский полуостров. Можно стать воздушным асом. Можно стать воздушной планетой. И будешь уверен, что эту планету примут по учебнику.
As we can see, the sentences lack a common theme or meaning. There is only a connection between words in isolated parts of the sentences. The patient speaks voluminously and continuously. The symptom can manifest as mentioned in schizophrenia, as well as in a dementia or brain damage, such as stroke or tumor that affect the speech center, developing into an aphasic disorder, which is a disorder of already formed speech. Motor aphasia, or Broca's aphasia. Widely known thanks to a male patient in his 30s, Louis Victor Le Borgne. I hope I pronounced this right, who lost his ability to speak. All he could say was just a single word, done. The case happened a long time ago, back during the dawn of neurobiology in 19th century. The patient died at the age of 51, and the anatomist, Paul Broca, performed an autopsy on his body. During the procedure, a lesion was discovered in the posterior inferior frontal gyrus of the left hemisphere of the brain, which became the first evidence of connection between speech and a specific area of the brain. Essentially, the patient, while fully conscious and understanding everything that was happening, could not speak, despite being able to control his body. Simply put, the specific area of the brain responsible for this function was disabled. In general, looking at such cases, you become increasingly convinced of the mechanistic nature of our brain, as if it were a PC made up of various components, and a malfunction in any of them leads to similar results. Echolalia, echopraxia, and polylalia. Echolalia is found in all humans under the age of 4 due to the child's learning process. Echolalia is when a person repeats a word or sound they just heard. It can be complete, without understanding the meaning, and incomplete, with partial understanding, as well as immediate, occurring right away, or delayed, occurring after some time. At the same time, echopraxia can include gestures in addition to sounds. Echolalia in adults and echopraxia are pathological conditions. Most often they associate with ACD, catatonic schizophrenia, Tourette syndrome, lesions in the frontal lobes of the brain, and other things. The condition can be managed in some cases, but getting rid of them completely is impossible. In turn, polylalia is involuntary repetition of one's own words, of one's own words, of one's own words. It occurs in ACD, Parkinson's, Tourette's, strokes, and other bad things. A person begins to involuntarily, frequently, and with increasing speed repeat the same word or short phrase, which becomes more slurred and quieter each time. Visual phenomena, anosognosia and blindsight. Anosognosia is a disorder where a person denies having a disease or a physical defect. This phenomenon is often mentioned in the context of cortical blindness, when a person's visual cortex and associative areas are damaged, but the eyes are still functional and brain just doesn't realize it. The eyes keep sending signals, but there is no organ to analyze them. Because of this, the patient sees nothing, and to explain their failures in trying to prove they can see, they come up with various fabricated arguments. At the same time, they don't realize they're doing this, because the brain simply fills in the picture for itself. It's impossible to convince the patient of their blindness, as they are fundamentally convinced of their ability to see, and the unconscious part of the brain keeps trying to convince them of it. Due to the loss of associative areas, the brain cannot report to itself about the presence of damage, which is exactly why this phenomenon occurs. The same thing can happen with other organs. It's often the result of a stroke, severe drug addiction, alcoholism, or a mental disorder. Blindsight, in turn, is similar to the previous case, but the patient is aware of their blindness, with one big but. They can avoid obstacles and catch objects on the fly. This is because part of the signal from the eyes goes directly to the subcortical structures of the brain, which can control the body automatically, without the need for our conscious awareness, literally like a remote-controlled car. Hemispherical neglect. This is a phenomenon where a person is completely unaware of one half of anything, whether it's a plate, a house, or even the whole world. The person won't process that specific half. The drawings will only be half finished. For example, they will draw a clock with all the numbers squished onto only one side. They won't realize that there is another part of an object until the object is rotated or the person changes their position, thereby swapping the sides. This is often associated with a stroke. It can also be a tibial tumor in one of the hemispheres, thereby erasing the word on the opposite side of the patient. The patient might even ignore their own body parts on the missing side. Full rehabilitation is possible, but it all comes down to adequate treatment, the size of the lesion, and the patient's own bodily resources. Akinetopsia. This is a phenomenon where a person cannot perceive moving objects but only their static position. Moving objects don't actually move, but abruptly change their position, as if the person is playing a game with a huge ping or low FPS. The patient cannot see facial expressions or lip movements, and everyday life becomes very difficult due to the inability to calculate the distance to objects and their approach speed. They cause damage to the V5 area of the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for processing motion. Causes a stroke, a tumor, other lesions, as well as an overdose of antidepressants. Treatment is often impossible, and one can only hope that once the underlying cause of the damage is resolved, the phenomenon will disappear as well. Prosopometamorphopsia. This is a phenomenon where a person sees faces as extremely distorted. The person retains their ludicity and overall perception. It is specifically the perception of other people's faces that is distorted. These are not hallucinations, so the person understands their condition. It often develops due to migraines, damage to the occipitotemporal cortex, strokes, tumors, you get the idea, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other things. To the patient's faces change their shape, color, size, the position of facial feature shifts, and faces can appear grotesque. It might not be the whole face that is affected, but just one half. Treatment is only possible by eliminating the underlying cause. It goes away on its own. Delusional conditions. Boanthropy. This condition is similar to lycanthropy, where a person believes they are a wolf, but in this case, the person believes that they are a cattle, often a cow or a bull. They behave like this animal. Eat grass, moo, walk on all fours, butt heads. The most famous patient is Nebuchadnezzar II, who was written to have loved eating grass and living in the fields. The causes are said to be schizophrenia, psychotic depression, and bipolar disorder. Porphyria and syphilis are also mentioned. The treatment for boanthropy is primarily treating the underlying disease that caused it. Reduplicative paramnesia. This is a disorder in which the patient is convinced that a certain entity, object, or place exists in multiple locations simultaneously. For example, a patient is at an airport, absolutely certain that it is the exact replica of their house, and they are heading to an exact replica of their city, which contains exact duplicates of their friends. The condition is absurd in cases of brain damage, Alzheimer's, and other diseases. The patient loses the connection between a visual image and the information stored in their memory. Like the other mentioned illnesses, the treatment for this condition is the treatment of the underlying disease. Jerusalem syndrome. This is a condition where a person who visits Jerusalem starts believing that they are a prophet, a saint, or other biblical figure. Upon arriving in the city, the person experiences anxiety, after which they feel the need to perform some sort of purification ritual like bathing, and then they start preaching on the street, declaring themselves to be this or that biblical character. There are three causes for this phenomenon. The first one, against the background of pre-existing episodes of illnesses like schizophrenia, where religious delusions are triggered specifically by visiting a holy site. The second one, a personal crisis and personality traits that do not escalate into a full pathology. And the third one, an acute syndrome without any obvious causes. Treatment consists of isolating the patient from others and removing them from the city. The main triggers are considered to be emotional upheaval, culture shock, jet lag, and stress. Patient can be dangerous during these episodes. The condition worsens near historical sites associated with Christ, the Wailing Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and similar places. Behavioral conditions. Arbuckle disease. This is a rare genetic metabolic disorder that leads to the calcification of amygdala. This results in a complete lack of fear in patients, where their other emotions remain intact. Patients are not afraid of any threat, except the most primitive ones. For example, suffocation. Thus, in an experiment where healthy subjects were given controlled doses of carbon dioxide, they experienced discomfort. But the patient with these conditions experienced the panic triggered by the increased concentration of carbon dioxide in their blood. Gourmet syndrome. The syndrome manifests as the patient's increased craving for fine dining. They buy, cook, and eat exclusively gourmet food. This disorder is centered around consuming high-quality food and experiencing pleasure. The disorder is associated with damage to the frontal or temporal lobes, the basal ganglia of the right hemisphere, or the limbic system. It usually occurs after a stroke, a tumor, and the like. It's often considered a benign condition and doesn't particularly bother the patients. Photogen accent syndrome. In this condition, a person's speaking accent changes. The person sounds as if they are speaking with a foreign language accent. The cause is a microstroke or other brain damage, which impairs the muscular coordination of the person's vocal tract. Because of this, the so-called accent appears. It's not real. It is merely a perceived accent due to the patient's impaired speech production. Culture-bound conditions. Cora syndrome. It is mostly found in Malaysia and southern China. The syndrome manifests itself as an irrational panic, including fear of one's genitals are retracting into the body, shrinking or disappearing, which will lead to death. Patients experience a tightening sensation in the groin or chest area, even though these organs do not change their size. Because of this, patients pull, hold onto them with their hands, pinch them with needles and doing other bad things to keep their organs elongated. This leads to obvious consequences. The illness is often linked to local myths, beliefs and religion, a yin or yang deficiency, evil spirits, witchcraft and the like. Wendigo psychosis, a rare cultural bound syndrome among the indigenous peoples of North America. Patients feel like they are turning into a monster and crave human flesh. This phenomenon is associated with local beliefs in Wendigo, an evil, cannibalistic spirit that possesses people, which grow up with severe stress, paranoia, depression, and intense starvation in the conditions of cold North America, and isolation. The phenomenon was prevalent in the 20th century, but has now practically disappeared. Dostoevsky and Gershwin syndrome. Dostoevsky syndrome in neurology is associated with a specific state a person experienced during an epileptic seizure. The name is linked to the writer, Dostoevsky, who likely suffered from it. This is a form of temporal lobe epilepsy where a person experiences happiness, euphoria, and ecstasy right before a seizure. The person feels a sense of boundlessness and oneness with the world. Gershwin syndrome and Dostoevsky syndrome are closely connected. It would be more accurate to say that Dostoevsky syndrome is a part of a broader Gershwin syndrome. The patient suffers from hyperfocus on details, hypersexuality, an overwhelming urge to write or draw, hyperreligiosity that can escalate into fanatism or dogmatism, excessive speech and getting stuck on a single topic, intense emotionality, and an exaggerated sense of morality and justice. It is also a manifestation of epilepsy, namely between seizures due to increased activity in the temporal lobes. It is believed that the strong connection between the limbic system and the auditory or visual cortex of the brain, combined with constant microstimulation from epilepsy, forced the brain to assign immense significance even to the most trivial and minor things. And I thought to put there a God's helmet experiment, but it appears that it's pretty much outdated and not been confirmed. So that's it.